Hello there guys and welcome back to the channel. So Kabam Crashed has effectively posted his Banquet event post-mortem, and I do think this is quite an interesting topic to discuss, because it certainly is something that community still actively debates. Some people love the Banquet event, some people absolutely hated it, many found it underwhelming, and a lot of people were somewhere in between. But it's always interesting to see, kind of in-depth breakdown of such a big event. And first things first, I do want to say thanks to Kabam Crash. Now, again, by no means, I do not hide the fact that I do not necessarily agree with everything he says, and I do not necessarily agree with the logic that is going through this man's head or the entire team in the Kabam, to be honest. But at the same time, I have openly said that I do think he is one of the better and more capable Kabam employees, and it is often a joy to read his posts, and it does appear that he certainly does take pride in his work and tries his best to communicate himself to the player base. And I just want to acknowledge that as far as I'm concerned, he's the best of them, or just about. And that's important, because not many people working at Kabam would have taken the time to write all of this up when they didn't have to. Really. He hit the max character limit in the post, so, had to do 2 consecutive posts effectively. And also, whenever he goes on Kabam streams, I found those streams to be way more informative and way more to my liking, opposed to, some goofing off or fake laughs and fake jokes running, and stuff like that being on those streams. So he's definitely one of the guys that I want to see and hear more from, opposed to many others. That said, I do think he makes mistakes, and I do think he's wrong, and I do think this partially is one of those times as well. There's a lot of truth in it, but I do think some key aspects of the post-mortem are being overlooked too. So obviously I'm not going to read all of this, otherwise it's going to take many hours. I will leave a link to this post in the video description. But the point is, he's quite an active player himself. He does have a large, or fairly large endgame account with 150 plus 7 stars. And he's effectively in charge of Banquet event and a lot of things going on at the Kabam. He effectively answers how the Banquet event was made. Again, it's a fairly technical process with a timeline laid out, and it's again very detailed kind of post-mortem. So, great for that. Now, he talks about how does player sentiment impact an infinite game. And he talks about his past experience where players had effectively bad reaction to specific offers, but those offers did well. And then at the same times, when the player sentiment does reflect how the offers do. And he's talking about, MCOC being effectively an infinite game where the purpose is to play more and to develop and not to finish the game, which is effectively impossible. And it is quite important as well. Kabam is very much so responsible, in my opinion, for this game not being significantly bigger than it is. And a lot of it is the bugs, the issues. So many people that I know have left this game because of technical issues like that. AI getting screwed up, champions being released bugged all the time, there's issue with rewards, and so on and so forth. Obviously, he's not necessarily in charge of that, but if he's talking about the game being infinite and wanting the game to do better as it possibly can, that is one of the biggest issues by far. Another thing would be the champion design and the general feel of the new event, new quests, whether they're fun and whether the champions that we are fighting are challenging, let's say, but fun. And I think Kabam's failing us in that regard a lot more, making this into a card game over a fighting game, where unless you have a perfect counter for Serpent, you're just gonna lose and die. Opposed to, unless you have a perfect counter to Korg, you still have a chance of your way to do well in that fight if you're extremely skilled, or you just, or you can get a counter. but facing Korgon defense is not effectively a death sentence in the same way as it is facing Serpent, Enchantress, Bullseye, and many of the newer champions. So I think that affects the potential of this game. And most importantly, it's also the aggressive monetization tactics that Kabam is employing, because I do feel that Kabam has figured out that their player base is not necessarily growing, so they are trying to max out the amount that they can sell to each player, and that fuels a lot of bad sentiments in the game. And that was one of the biggest issues with this Banquet event too, because everything cost more. It went from 10k units required to hit all the milestones, even if the milestones are objectively better. That sudden price hike is what ticked off the most people with the Banquet event, as well as superior Banquet crystals being effectively kind of crap. Now, and he does address the cost difference. The MCOC economy is really interesting, at least to me. It is both deflationary and inflationary at the same time. It is deflationary in that almost everything gets less valuable over time. Players are nearly aware of this fact and interact with the game. They know something that costs 1,000 units today will cost 500 units at some point in not so distant future. There's a reason every modern economy targets modest inflation. People knowing this will get cheaper over time is bad for business, but deflation is a quirk most live service game economies that we have to deal with. At the same time, he's maintaining the fact and that, however, at the same time, MCOC economy is inflationary in that the money supply units is increasing over time. There are a couple of reasons for this. The first is unit yields have increased. DNA has a good post here, which he estimates that arena unit yields per hour have roughly tripled in the last 4 years. And let's face it, part of it is true. It is easier to hit arena milestones than it used to be with the higher ranked champions. There are several core problems with this. Number one, you cannot put an equal sign in green money in units, because, for instance, if somebody does not have the time to grind the game or as much, Odin doesn't cost any less. Odin doesn't offer you more units. Well, the web store kind of does now a bit, but for most part, $100 is $100, right? And Odin or unit cost to buy has not decreased. Number two, the total amount of units that you can grind in arena has not changed either, hasn't been updated. And number three, again, there's a very large segment of the player base who does not grind the arena, therefore cannot accumulate extra large amount of units. And also there is such thing as being caught off guard and budgeting. If the players, because players effectively take precedent from the past sales. Like if you're going in, let's say, July 4th sale, that 18k units will get you a fair amount. Kabam is going to add some extra units, so you probably, kind of plan on the 24k units at this point over years. But effectively, you know what to expect. You do not expect that, for instance, instead of the 24k units, all of a sudden it's going to be 36k units, which effectively was the jump here. And if something like that happens, there's like a significant issue there. Like when Cyber Weekend comes, there's going to be some deals, but you can more or less count your X amount of units getting just about everything needed, rather than, Kabam putting on 1.5x. And that was a massive increase. Like before the gifting event started, before the Banquet event started, everybody was kind of like saying, how many units do you think we will need to hit all the milestones? And the typical answer is probably around 10k. That's what it has been historically. It used to be less, but it used to be like 6, 8k, fair enough, 10k, something like that. But then all of a sudden it jumped up to 15k plus, which is a massive difference there. And that's bad. Because, automatically, of course, that does mean that, for many players, Banquet event, is going to be more expensive, because you will have to buy more units that you are missing or you're going to be missing out. And that is another thing that Banquet event always has to know how to balance, is the FOMO. It's like everybody's getting all of this, but because, let's say Kabam did this and that that is unexpected, that I failed to prepare, or Kabam failed to kind of like let us know about, I'm going to be missing out on those rewards. Now, it's not necessarily always the Kabam's fault, and there is a significant deal of player entitlement in that as well. But you can't argue with somebody who feels that Kabam has slighted them. You can say all the logical, reasonable things like, you should have been more responsible. You should have expected, you should have put away some extra money or granted some extra units, and all of that stuff you can kind of like try and reason, but it's not going to change the fact that people are pissed off. And this event definitely pissed off quite a lot of people. And then we talk about the Valiant progression players that were lumped in with Thronebreaker progression players. And this is another thing that is increasingly kind of making more and more people upset, because there are effectively almost fewer and fewer places where, being Valiant really matters all that much, aside from deals out of the Banquet event. But, when it comes to the rewards budget and, in-game calendars, for instance, Thronebreakers, Paragons, and Valiants get the same ones, or, Paragons and Valiants do. And initially, I think it's a good thing when Kabam introduces a new progression difficulty, for the first 3 to 4 months. Fair enough, because a lot of people will not have just quite made it there, but will be in a very similar position. But right now, you can't really compare the interests of endgame Valiant players and the necessities of endgame Valiant players in terms of materials and so on and so forth to, Thronebreaker players. And Kabam always encourages us to look in the way that, it's not necessarily that Valiants are getting the worst deal, it's that Thronebreakers are getting the better one. But again, you can logically try to reason and explain it that, Thronebreaker rewards got increased because, and effectively it's not taking away anything from you, but it doesn't change the way the people feel. And in these instances, people still feel like if you have done all the work required to become Valiant, and then people who have not done that work or have started playing more recently or significantly more casual, stuff like that, they're getting the same thing. So it feels like devaluing your effort and your time within the game. And even if it's not the case, the way Kabam explained it, or even if they think it's not the case, people still find issue with it. And that is not going to change. And effectively with this one, Kabam is basically saying, we're not going to change. I'll be honest, given the tremendous success of this event in every aspect except social channel sentiment, I don't see us making any major changes in how we segment players in Banquet beyond what we have already done. So that's one middle finger there, but, fine. Again, they do talk about the Banquet event 2024 being worse than Banquet event 2023, and I don't necessarily think it was. If you got everything, that is. And that is the difference. Because this time around, I do think there were more people who missed out on things or felt pressured into spending more than they expected and so on and so forth. But, for the amount of units, I do think we got relatively good rewards. I think, unfortunately, a lot of rank rewards were quite bad and rewards distribution was not necessarily the best. But overall, if you were getting up to that 7-star Isophene, which, by the way, how popular is Isophene right now? But I don't think the total set amount of rewards was, that bad. There was 7-star Awakening Gem, there were a few rank 3 champions in there, and there were like a couple of 7-stars to open, and I don't think anywhere else in the game up until this date you could have gotten more value for 15,000 units or 16,000 units. I do think that a lot of choices in the structure of these events felt worse. For instance, the amount of units that we got back, Kabam lists here units 4,200, in the milestones 400, 200, 400, 200, but there were more units elsewhere previously. I do strongly recall having like 600 unit milestones and so on and so forth, and that was missing. Because he's comparing only the solo milestones here this year, but conveniently missing are the alliance milestones this year, right? And there were more units elsewhere before. Cheeky, I think. But The point is, I personally don't think it was, bad or worse in terms of rewards. I think it was fine. I think the cost was the issue, and I think the feel of the event was the issue, primarily. There you go. Okay, but top spenders already have every 7-star. Why couldn't the crystals have more of that stuff in them? They effectively talk about the game's, life cycle here. And I kind of get it, but it's effectively just negotiating the price tag. Ultimately, I do not know how Kabam can sort this out within their view of game economy, but it is a fact that it is a fact that the Banquet crystals felt kind of like crap. And again, from the Shurikao being clearer and more explicit in the initial comment, okay, why I said he did talk about the Banquet crystals, and he says that he still strongly believes that these crystals were good and useful, because previously in the old Banquet crystals, we had a lot of 6-star stuff, and just about everything in these crystals was usable. But again, the problem with these crystals is that 90+% of them felt cracked open, because even if we got the good items, they were still not worth the 300 units. They objectively just weren't. And whilst every crystal is supposed to be a gamble, in this case, the way Kabam did it and set it up, they made it feel like you're losing even when you're pulling the good items. And that means that, vast majority of the crystals will have that impression that you're just getting, scammed, done it, because of the amount of stuff that you get from these crystals and the amount of stuff that you can get anywhere and everywhere else in the game economy for significantly less or free rather than 300 units. And there you go. At this point, this might be an unpopular opinion, but maybe not making every reward at the very least a little bit usable, but by the extension of that, making almost all of the rewards feel shit. It would almost be better if there was, some stuff that's for the 6 stars, or something like that doesn't have the value, if that means that when you actually get 7-star shards, it's a meaningful amount. When you actually get Titan shards, it's a meaningful. I don't know the answer to this, but I do know that what they did with the Banquet crystal did not work, and it was depressing to open them, and just about the worst thing about the event. Because it was so deflationary, opening like 10 crystals, and then 1,000 7-star shards, 2,000 7-star shards, 1,000 Titan shards, and tier 6 basic, tier 3 alpha, tier 6 basic, and so on and so forth, and you're like, and tiny amounts of them as well. You weren't even getting full tier 6 basics, you were like 10,000 tier 6 basic fragments. You're like, it just did not feel great. Why you lied to us? I never think he did, by the way. People do run away with it, so I get him here. And why did it take so long to announce the Banquet details? They just effectively are saying that they do not have a specific timeline, which is something I suggest they do resolve and get a specific timeline and do announce it, a bit in advance so people know what to expect. Like units, for instance. If they announce that the Banquet event is going to cost 15,000 units, like 1 month before the Banquet event started, that would save a lot of people a lot of trouble. There's just that. Them saying there is no set precedent of us doing it doesn't mean that there shouldn't be. Doesn't mean that they shouldn't announce these things quicker. We haven't discussed plans for next year. Well, I'll give you advice. Let people know a month in advance. Okay. Are you happy with the Banquet event? And here's the thing. My feelings are mixed. This year, I am even more sad with how the community responded, given the lengths the team went through to make December exciting. And I do think overall, you know, he talks about making December exciting. I think a lot of cool stuff happened in December. You know, I think the gift was cool. I think the 10x10 calendar, even though it didn't specifically particularly benefit me in any way, aside from getting a 7-star Gwenpool, which I don't give a shit about, and getting Isophine, which, you know, at the moment, at the very least, doesn't seem like a fairly significant acquisition. At the same time, you know, I was very hyped that I was getting that Isophine, and a lot of things in December were cool, but especially adding 6 reworks. Yeah, reworks for the most part cool too, that we didn't plan on going into the year. With the increasing cost of the Banquet milestone, some players are always going to get priced out. You see? There you go. So why do you do that then? Why do you accept it? That, you know, more players are getting priced out. But I hope that players would look at everything we offered in December and be excited about it. Well, some of you were, clearly a significant group of players. That wasn't the case. And, you know, here I agree. You can never please everybody, and regardless of how amazing event Kabam puts together, there will be people who do not like things. So I think that's, you know, fairly set expectation for a whole bunch of what Kabam does. At the same time, a lot of these things should have been visible. Like, if you do increase the cost of Banquet, you know, well, with the increasing cost of the Banquet milestone, some players are always going to get priced out. And you didn't think that people are going to get pissed off about it? That's like one of the biggest things about the entire thing. Like, the Banquet event is the biggest thing of December. The amount of units and or cash something costs is quite literally the most significant thing for, you know, a very, very large player base. It's like, whilst, you know, some players were going to get priced out, it's not a whilst thing. It's a fundamental issue. It's to the point where, like, just about nothing else you do matters if a significant amount of players cannot benefit from the main thing. And this is the type of stuff that I don't understand why Kabam doesn't get. It's kind of like Kabam, you know, could release, you know, an account changing offer or like the biggest grand offer and, like, you know, price it for 5K. Some people will get it and will be very happy, but there's going to be insane amount of people who are very pissed off about it because they cannot afford it, right? Because they get priced out. And that, you know, would cause a massive reaction community. And while that is an extreme example, simply, you know, increasing the cost of the event by like 5K units for an average player, that's a massive jump. And you know, everything else put aside, Kabam can never have this type of idea where we're going to increase the cost of this event by 50%. And, you know, while some players are going to get pressed out, I still hope they're going to be happy. It's never going to happen. If you're going to price out a significant segment of the player base, you are going to hear about it. Well, so, okay. Having said that, it's probably clear based on the performance of the Realm event, aside from the sentiment, the event went very well, and, you know, that's the bottom line, is the whales did whale a ton. For me personally, this was a very, very, you know, minimal Banquet event. I did spend some, but I effectively got the milestones and was just about done. Had some units, you know, and got a couple of offers, nowhere near as I would have done in the past events, for instance. Lots of factors in that. So, you know, realistic results. I'm personally not, you know, utterly dishappy with the Banquet event. But a significant reason I can react that way is because at the end of the day, I still, at the very least, got the milestones. And, you know, the final objectives done. Had that not be the case, you know, it's very well possible that my feelings would have changed. But let's hear the final thoughts. Last year, I identified 4 opportunities for improvement with the Banquet. This year, the main takeaway for me is that we need to make the crystals more fun. Yes. The poor crystal opening experience, alongside the sky-high expectations that we set, that is another thing. Yes, the sky-high expectations that they set by first time ever separating crystals for progression level did give, a lot of players hope that the Banquet crystals will finally be, current and great open. And then having depressing crystals whilst having these expectations increased definitely created this kind of like sentiment towards the event. Clearly created a bad experience for some summoners. Hopefully they write up better sets expectation for next year and provide some context. And here again, he missed out the biggest thing too. They priced out a lot of players. That is the sauce there as well. They really, really, really did price out a lot of players, which immediately meant there's going to be a huge pushback. And that is not something that, they should be able to mention as whilst, some players are going to be priced out. That is a massive thing. How fun these crystals are to open is secondary, I would even argue. If the players can't, enjoy the full experience of the event by getting priced out. In fact, if they increase the total cost of the milestones and then make the crystals even better, that would make a lot of people feel even worse. Because then they would feel like, they're missing the rewards from the milestones and the realm event and everything else, and they're missing the, the good stuff from the Banquet crystals. So, again, as often with Kabam Crushed, I do agree with a lot of what he stated here. Ultimately, at the end of the day, for Kabam, I believe the Banquet went with success. Regardless of what, players feel about it, short term. How things like that affect them long term, I don't think they themselves even know. But there's definitely room for improvement, which he acknowledges. I do think he's missing half the point, arguably the most important point, by simply just being able to defer to the fact that it's like, yeah, well, it's easier to get arena milestones now. I would want to know, how big is arena participation in general compared to how it used to be, because the game is much bigger, and after this post, and again, I think it is very good that he made it, I still get a massive feeling that Kabam is missing the main issue with the event, which in my opinion was them pricing out a large portion of the player base. Let me know what you guys think. Again, some good, some bad, but as he typed in his final thoughts, not mentioning the increase in the cost, it does not make me optimistic for the next Banquet. See you guys soon. Bye-bye. Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. So we have all the information about